was worse. Now I embrace it.
Right. And that's where I am now. I mean, not that I ever ran away from it, but I never really, chased it or embraced it until, after my, father was gone, and, felt like it kind of felt like it fell on me to, keep this side of the story going, right? Because people are asking me, like, I'm this, expert. Yeah, I lived it from personal experience, and I have my own perspective, but, anybody could read the books. Anybody can do their homework.
Right. It's not like you were in the life,
right.
They kept you out of the life, but
absolutely.
You got the knowledge.
But all the uncles and, guys we called uncle, and all the people around, and you understood, the structure of the family and the code, and, what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act, right? Because that was part of our upbringing, how to be, men of honor.
What stands out at you the most with your grandfather? Like, if he was here today, what would he say about what's going on today in the world?
Oh, well, with just all the surveillance and the phones and the cameras.
All the technology. What would he say?
Yeah, he would not, he probably would not have any of it in his house. And, would be paranoid. He was already paranoid, back, using payphones. Even when they talked on payphones, they spoke in Sicilian, and then they spoke in him and my dad had their own little dialect of, kind of a code that they would talk on. I couldn't even imagine now with all the technology.
Back in 2000, when I got here, I heard he was making guys in Tucson. Mm-hmm. Your grandfather.
Yeah.
Starting a whole nother family.
Well, I don't know if he was starting a
That was a rumor,
family.
yeah.
It was, but there were guys made, towards the end of his life, but yeah.
I mean, I
don't
think it's so.
They were making a whole nother family, but yeah, they were still. He was still he was still Joe Bonanno, right? Even though
I'm not saying this because you're here, but he had balls. I mean, the guy had big balls. I mean, just everything he did in his life, everything he accomplished. And
when you say balls, he did some ballsy things, but for me, it was more that he thought about everything. He didn't, you think ballsy, you think some guy just, running into the flames.
No, he was smart.
He was so smart. He was always thinking. He thought of all the ramifications of any decision. He's a huge thinker. That's a good shot of him.
He was methodical in the way he did things. It wasn't like he was like a knee-jerk reaction. Huh?
Never. And even when he felt like having a knee-jerk reaction, he was smart enough to take a step back and say, okay, think about this, and he would look from both sides of it.
Well, think about it. I mean, the guy was a visionary, right? He was a visionary in the sense that he started the commission. He was a huge contributor to that. Yep. He started his own crime family. He got out when it was time to get out.
And he will say he started his own family. He won't say crime family because that's just...
Right, so let's say his own family.
His own family, right.
Yeah, but we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
His own family.
Yep.
And then he kind of got away, kind of retired when the time was right.
Right.
And he was a visionary and wrote a book. I mean, I think about it, he was a visionary, the guy.
I like that description.
No, I was always intrigued by it. I was always interested, even before I met you and stuff. Like I said, I'm ecstatic to have you here. The only Bonannos, and this is way after your grandfather. I'm from a neighborhood in Little Italy, as you know. Most of the Bonannos in my neighborhood were from Elizabeth Street. You ever been to Little Italy?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so if you take Houston all the way up to Canal Street.
Right, and my daughter and I were just in there 2 weekends ago, and we had the argument, why is it Houston and not Houston? But anyway.
Yeah.
It's spelled the same anyway.
It's like when I went to Boston, they were like, the way it's spelled, Worcestershire or whatever, they go Worcester.
Worcester, Mass.
Same type of thing. But on Elizabeth Street was most of the Bonannos, I would say. I hate to give credit where credit's due in this sense because I have a personal issue with not the Bonanno family, just this one family in particular. But anyways, there were guys from my neighborhood. One I'll talk about, he had a club on Mott Street between Houston and Prince. He had a club. Mm-hmm. His name was Russel Mauro. I don't know if you ever heard of him. No. Okay. So Russel was a made guy in the Bonanno family. He was under a guy called Sonny Red. I don't know if you ever heard of Sonny Red and Delicato. Yeah. So the Delicatos were from Elizabeth Street. They were mainly from Elizabeth between Grand and Broome. Yeah, it's Russell. Mm-hmm. So anyways, the Delicatos, you had Sonny Red, was the father. Then you had his son, Bruno Delicato. And they were the Bonanno guys. And his brother, JB. He had a brother, Sonny Red. JB, I think he's still alive. I know Sonny passed away, and I know Bruno, he's out there. He just got out. And then you had another Bonanno guy from my neighbor called Mike Sabella. Well, not to get the timelines mixed up, I'll go down the list one at a time, you know. Just to rewind it, there was a guy that was from my neighborhood. He was born in East Harlem, but he was from my neighborhood. His name was Carmine Galante.
Yeah.
They called him Lilo.
The famous picture.
Yeah. And the famous hit where,
right.
you know, they killed him. Hold the picture where you got the last smoke in Brooklyn or whatever. Yeah. Galante, I think, was right after your grandfather left.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I heard that your grandfather was the one who actually made him, brought him into the family.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, and this guy, from what I heard, was just a maniac, you know, like a wild.
Yeah.
I heard a story where, like you say, he's talking with a bunch of guys. They got a problem with somebody. Yeah. He would leave, jump in a car, go, kill the guy, and then come back. And like, wow. It's done. You know, no talking, no nothing. That's how ruthless he was, right? He was a big name for my neighborhood. But he was so crazy, what I heard was that he wanted to start straightening out women. He wanted to start making women in the family.
How'd that work, yeah.
But you know something, I got to say the truth, though. There was some woman from my neighborhood that, I tell you what.
It would have been better, right?
Yeah, it would have been better. Or, yeah. One in particular, it was a guy from my neighborhood. Well, he wasn't from my neighborhood. He was from the 4th Ward. His name was Joe D'Amico. We used to call him the Mook. His mother, may she rest in peace, she was one of those girls that could have been. If anybody should have been made, she should have been made. That's how tough she was. Yeah. I remember from a kid walking the street, you know, just a tough woman. Yeah. And she wanted her son to be that way. But Joe wasn't really turned into that. He turned into that way, but he really wasn't. Because he was close to my uncle, you know, growing up. Joe went to military school. You know, he did the right thing. You know, good-looking kid. You know, very respectful. You know, well-liked. Great personality. He turned into just what the mother wanted him to be.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Turned into a gangster, you know. She got him, and there's rumors that she got him made. I don't know for sure. Nobody ever confirmed it. But the rumor with him was that the mother went to school with Lilo. She went to Catholic school with him. So she was very tight with Carmine Galante. And she wanted her son to be made. You know, she wanted him to be made so bad, you know. And rumor had it that he took $50,000 from her. And said, give me 50 grand and I'll straighten him out. So that was always over his head. Like, oh, yeah, his mother paid for his badge, you know? And he lived with that for years. I know he heard it before, but the guy was a stone cold killer he turned out to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did work. I mean, he stabbed, he shot, he did whatever they told him to do. The guy who he was under was Al Walker. Al Walker was another, okay, I think that's Tony Mirror, but Tony Mirror was his cousin. Mm. And I remember he whacked him out 2 buildings down from where I used to live.
Oh, wow.
You know, his own cousin. It's always somebody who is close to you is going to set you up. Right? But Tony Mirror was another guy who was out of control. You know, he was just a tough guy. Rumor had it that he was cooperating. You know, there was all kinds of stuff floating around. Anyways, Joe D'Amico, what had happened was everybody started flipping. So you got Joe Messina.
Yeah.
Well, here, not to get into that yet, right? Because there's so much. Going back to the Delicatos, right? Let's go with Russel. Russel Mauro was a made guy with the Bonanno family, and he was part of the Galante hit. He was one of the shooters. Mm-hmm. He went in there with a shotgun. He was very close to Sonny Red, and he was one of their guys that, you know, he'll kill you in a heartbeat. And again, it's like a bittersweet thing with this guy because he was part of killing my uncle. And honestly, if he was around today, if I was around today, I would seek revenge. Anyways, Russell was a tough guy. He was one of the shooters from the Bonanno family. He was a known shooter. Not a funny story, but when he was killed, the same way like he killed everybody else. You know, they walked him into a club, lured him in, and then shot him.
Wow.
Right? His brother wanted to know who the killers were. So his brother was grieving. So it came time, the murder trial was going on. The witness got on the stand, talked about how he got Russell to walk into the club. The brother started screaming in the courtroom, "You piece of shit, you did this, you lured my brother in, you this, you that." I want to say, are you kidding me? Like, in other words, I can understand you're grieving for your brother.
Right, but
what about the people he killed?
Right.
You know? You see what I'm saying? Live by the sword, die by the sword, right?
Absolutely.
You got to look at it and say, well, your brother killed I don't know how many people. That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
But what I do know about what the work that they did, because I was walking the yard in Otisville with the guys who did the work, you know, Mickey Batts and D. Simone, you know, a couple of those guys from Queens, you know, another Bonanno faction. And they said, you know what, Frank, we tried to make him kneel before we killed him. Because I wanted to hear about it, because he was there when they killed my uncle. I'm like, tell me about what happened, you know. We got him in, you know, and I want him to kneel, you know, to beg for his life. I said, did he kneel? He said, no, he wouldn't kneel. He, according to them, he went out like a man. You know, he cursed at them before they gave him the last shot. That was that.
Yeah.
I didn't know Russell was involved with killing my uncle when I was on the street, because I used to see him a lot.
Right.
You know, because he had a club on my street. I always ran into him. He was a guy from the neighborhood. Never knew he had anything to do with it.
Damn.
Now, going up to the Indelicados, you got, you know, Sonny Redden, who was another tough guy from our neighborhood. He was a captain for a long time.
Yeah.
And he was one of the 3 captains that got killed that everybody knows about. And his son Bruno was part of the Galante Carmine DeLillo hit. And his son Bruno was involved with a lot of hits, you know.
Really?
So these are the guys that were from my neighborhood that I will give as a gangster from a gangster perspective, these guys were stone cold gangsters.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a personal thing there that I have. Anyway, Sonny Red was killed. Bruno just missed getting killed. He was in and out of jail. I think he just got home, and he's got a position. If anybody deserves a position, he does, because he's been through it. And then you got Mike Sabella. Mike Sabella, I think, came around right after your grandfather left. He was a big name for a long time. He had a club on Hester Street between Baxter and Mulberry, Mike Sabella's club. And everybody thought that Casabella was Mike Sabella's place, because Labella, you know, but it's not, you know. Mike was always known as like a gentleman, powerhouse name. You know, he was due to take over for Rusty. I forget Rusty's nickname, but you know these names, right? But this is all after your grandfather. It seemed it seemed like all the chaos happened after your grandfather left.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's when it started, and then, it got more chaotic for sure. So
yeah, so then with the agent, Brasco, Donnie Brasco, that whole thing. And then most recently, Joe Messina. Joe Messina was involved in everything.
Oh, right.
You know, and Joe Messina goes and flips. Not only does he flip, he wears a wire. To me, there's different levels of cooperation. Say a guy cooperates, right? Okay, so there's a confidential informant. He's given information on the street. To me, that's one of the worst things you could do. You're playing the role, then you're giving information on the side, right? So there's plenty of CIs out there. We talk about how do they know everything. Well, they know everything because of the CIs.
Right.
You know, they leave them out there on the street. They tell them, hey, as long as you don't do anything violent, you know, they'll let you bookmake, we'll let you Sherlock, let you do all these things, and you're going to report to us. And some of them are on payroll. I know that for a fact. Then you got the guy who wears a wire. To me, that's the lowest form. To go to your friend or ex-friend or whatever and record him. And then you get the guy who's locked up and he has no choice. And, you know, people argue that and say, well, he had a choice, whatever the case was, to do his time. And then he goes and cooperates and gets a deal. Or some guys don't get a deal. They rip up their agreement. Then there's the guy where it's a life and death situation. They want to kill the guy or they want to kill somebody in his family. And he's doing whatever he can to protect his family and himself. So to wear a wire is like the unthinkable for like a sitting boss.
Right.
Like a official sitting boss, Joe Messina. That really nobody talks about that much.
Right.
You know, other guys will get the talk, you know, gas pipes and this one and that one. But Joe Messina was just as bad.
That's all right.
Just as ruthless, just as much of a killer, just as capable, just as smart. And he was a guy that knew the rules. He was like one of the last guys who actually knew the rules of La Cosa Nostra. And for him not only to cooperate, but then agree to wear a wire on the people under him.
Yeah, that's...
Like this guy, Vinny Basciano, who's still locked up. You know? I mean, you know the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then after him, before him was Frank Copa, started the ball rolling. Then his brother-in-law flipped, Sally Vitale. So what I'm getting at with Joe D'Amico is Joe D'Amico was on the street. Everybody's flipping. His boss flipped. His two captains flipped. The underboss flipped. I mean, it was like a string of guys. And he wore a wire. So now, if Joe D'Amico just wore a wire, I will look at him and go, yeah, I put you right down below everybody else, right? But I look at him and say, well, your boss wore a wire, your captain wore a wire, everybody wore a wire in your family. So what did he really, I mean, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, he doesn't get a pass, but...
It's understandable.
It's...
Yeah, more
is it as bad, right. You know? So anyways, he went, he wore a wire. He was smart enough to think, okay, I'm going to get indicted for 4 murders. Yeah. He wore a wire. Something. He cut a deal. I don't think he did a day. And he may be alive today. If he still is, God bless him, you know? You had another kid from my neighborhood who came later on, this kid, PJ. Was pretty much a good kid from the neighborhood. I heard he became a made guy and, you know, which I don't know how, but he's a capable kid.
Right.
He was with the Bonannos. He did something. He was in jail, okay, waiting for pretrial. The deal was they let him out on a bail, right? But the plan was he went out there to wear a wire on Bruno. So here he is. They give him bail from jail, and you're thinking the guy got out on whatever release just to wear a wire on Bruno. Gave Bruno another 20 years, which he just got done doing the time.
Wow.
So that I mean, it just gets... It gets worse and worse, you know. This is all after your grandfather, and I think everything changed with the times we're in, and the whole culture, the whole thinking. It was just every man for himself, you know. I mean, until today, you know, murder took a holiday. As you don't see nobody getting killed, you don't see nobody nothing, because with the technology today and the cameras and the CIs that are out there, confidential informants,
it's different.
You know, so
it's really different.
When you get a guy like your grandfather who sees the writing on the wall, you know, that's why I say he's a visionary. I'm not just saying it because you're here. I'll say this to everybody. He was a visionary because he already seen, you know, I mean, not that he had a crystal ball, but he knew it was over.
He talked about that, and what you're describing, you know, coincided with, you know, the rise of narcotics, right? And he always felt... Somehow they, you know, in his mind, in my dad's mind as well, and still to this day, a lot of people, and I have a hard time with it, but, you know, they separate alcohol and narcotics, right? Somehow they're different. Like, you know, bootlegging alcohol was okay, but, you know, to my grandfather and father, narcotics were, you know, and that's why they didn't like Lilo and, you know, just wash their hands of him, because, you know, he was doing, you know, narcotics dealing when it was forbidden by my grandfather, but, you know, they were doing it because there was so much money in it. And I think that's why a lot of these guys flip. Or in the old days, you had to live by the code, and the code was everything. In the old days, you had to earn your way up, right? There was no other way. But now with the narcotics and all the money guys can make, they didn't need to do all these old rules and follow these old dudes. They can make a big score on their own. And, you know, it kind of ripped up the fabric of, you know, the whole code of the Costa Nostra. At least that's what my grandfather, you know, saw happening with narcotics. And that's his take on it, was that, you know, the money that the narcotics brought in, you know, ripped the fabric apart. And it became more of a business, you know, than a tradition or a code of conduct.
I had heard that when they were getting ready to take out Lilo, they wanted to make sure they had your grandfather's blessing. They went to go see him in Tucson or met him somewhere and wanted to make sure that he was okay with it.
Yeah, and I don't think I never heard that he blessed it, but he wasn't going to stop it, right? He knew, he was informed. He appreciated about getting informed, but because he didn't have it, there was no love lost between him and, you know, Carmine at the end. He felt that he was betrayed in the whole, you know, a lot of things he did after my grandfather wasn't happy about, so.
Right. Yeah, he was a maniac.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't institute it. He didn't stop it. He just kind of, okay.
Smart.
So I guess you can consider that a blessing in some way, yeah.
The 60-minute interview was before the book, after the book, or?
Oh, well, it was, he had lived in Tucson since the 40s, and that, I think it was like 83, that interview in 60 Minutes. So it was all, he was living in Tucson, at that time, but, he had been out, pretty much left, Manhattan or New York, what he called the volcano. He left in, late 60s, early 70s.
He called it the volcano?
The volcano. He never referred to it as New York City. He called it the volcano. Why? Because there was always something erupting. He always, it was always tumultuous, and he always referred to it as the volcano. I went back to the volcano. I'm in the volcano. That's what he referred to.
You have a nickname for Tucson?
No.
No, it was like,
the old Pueblo, but,
The old Pueblo.
He just called it Tucson, home. That was his home. He loved Tucson. He absolutely loved Tucson.
That was his serenity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's all about the Bonannos. Always a pleasure having you, buddy. Like I said, honor to have you here. Looking forward to do it again. Glad you can make it. Glad you're a friend of mine. Okay, pal.
All right. Thank you, buddy. See you.
You fuck around and playing with the wrong pistol. My shit got a broken safety. Flow sumo, this ain't a game, Uno. Shout out to my Usos, killing bills like Uma. Balls travel from Pluto, big truck soprano, gabagool and prosciutto, kicking ill like judo, judge and jury like Judy. Hoes think they knew me, flows flow through me. Nike gray hoodie, contemplating money. Bees swarming like honey, watch your little homie filter through the phone.